Welcome to the Esports Business Podcast, where we connect the time-tested principles of business and team management with the rapidly growing esports industry. I'm Ben Wiggins here with Shivneet Sharma. Thanks for checking in with us. Shivneet, how are you today?
Doing good, Ben. Let's get into these headlines.
All right, let's go to some headlines. Superdata has reported that Fortnite's revenue dropped 48%, and that was in January, before the release of Apex Legends. Also, Epic's own Spellbreak entered its closed alpha stage, but Apex, specifically, is the first game to beat Fortnite on Twitch for 10 days in a row. Fortnite, as of the time that Velocity Esports reported on this, had only 10,000 more viewers than Apex Legends on Twitch. Much of the community has been quick to declare the death of Fortnite, as they are quick to declare the death of everything. Are the calls legitimate? Shivneet, what do you think?
Legitimate, no. Accurate to some extent, I would say, right? I mean, I think Fortnite is finally getting off the hype train, and I'm glad. I don't want to be on this. I don't want to be the conductor. I don't want to be on this crazy train. I'm done with the dances, the weird building, the jetpacks, and the battle bus, and whatever else Will Smith and Ninja are doing. Although it is kind of surprising that it was down before Apex Legends, I would love to see the number after. I think that's much more important. But I don't think it's dead. I think my little cousin still plays Fortnite. I still try to play with him. I'm still pretty garbage at building, but it's still a very active community. Ben, what do you think?
Right. So yeah, I'm with you. The calls are not legit. The reason Fortnite revenue fell, my guess, is because December's a holiday month and people do more gaming. When PUBG came out, they said Overwatch was dead. When Fortnite came out, they said PUBG was dead. Guess what? PUBG and Overwatch both still in the 10 most streamed games on Twitch. Overwatch League viewership is up from last year, as we'll discuss in a moment. Fortnite's time on top may be over, kind of like you said, but that's just not the same thing as dead.
Initial reports last November said that Nike and LPL were working on a sponsorship deal for 5 years worth $144 million. Now, VP Esports reports that the value and duration were incorrect. The duration will be 4 years, the value is lower, but an exact number has not been confirmed. But one of the interesting things is how Riot Games is getting things worked out with an individual team sponsors, such as Li Ning, which had previously existing relationship with EEG. Also, a revenue sharing plan has been put in place with Nike. In a report from Esports Observer, SK Telecom and Comcast Spectator will also create a joint esports venture to be named T1 Entertainment and Sports. The new organization will include the SK Telecom T1 League of Legends team and will compete in a variety of games, including Apex Legends. SK Telecom T1, of course, has won more world champions than any other League of Legends franchise. Ben, what do you think about all these mergers, I guess?
Brands need to get on board. Esports are taking over. Nike and Comcast are on board now. This is great news. The one caution that I would offer for brands looking to get into esports is synergy is a big deal. Nike and Comcast are great fits. Sports apparel, that sort of thing, sports drinks, nutrition, anything tech related, great fits. A company that makes consumer packaged goods might not be quite as natural a fit. Like esports and toothpaste might not be quite so easy to put together. What about you?
I think I touched up on this when we talked about the Coca-Cola deal, I believe, with Overwatch League. I think I stated that they were the catalyst for a bunch of big companies getting in. As much as I like a lot of big companies coming into esports, I think I'm very fearful of it almost taking over, how the NFL and NBA is with Nike and how they have to wear Nike sponsored this, Nike sponsored that. If they don't wear it, then I think a lot of businesses will take over possibly the personality of esports, right? And I think a lot of what happens is when businesses start merging with esports, we're going to see a lot of the life kind of taken out of teams. And I'm really afraid that these brands will start controlling the flow and pacing of esports when esports is doing really fine on that. And I think it has a very niche. It's kind of like that quirky girl in high school, you know? I think esports and a lot of big brands need to sort of maybe not ease off, but slow down.
I don't necessarily share those concerns. The NFL's apparel deals are a question for day-to-day operations. And yeah, it creates minor headaches when a player wants to wear something different than what the rest of the league is wearing, but it's not an existential threat. I think that esports I do think that it's pretty similar more to the NFL than, say, the NBA, because although you do see the players' faces while they're competing, they're sitting behind computers. So it's not as much interaction with the audience, for example. But overall, I just think it's going to be a net good thing. And yes, there will be details to iron out. But overall, I don't have a whole lot of concerns about about crushing the life out of esports because they're involved with these big corporate sponsors. GamblingNews.com reports that the Overwatch League boasted 30% more viewers year over year for the launch of its 2019 season. The Blizzard Arena Los Angeles completely sold out for the week of February 14th. Online, viewership also grew by 14%, with the average number of spectators hitting 440,000 viewers. According to the official press release, people from 190 countries tuned in to watch the games broadcast in 6 languages. Overwatch has been quickly expanding its format and reach, with 20 teams signed up for this year's Overwatch League competition. Blizzard has signed a series of broadcasting deals around the world, including the latest arrival of a Portuguese broadcast and the company teaming up with Sport One, a German TV channel which broadcasts in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Shivneet, what's up?
Man, Overwatch League is taking off, and I think it's a very big news, right? But I'm also on the side of that it should be doing this. I mean, the amount of investment, the amount of infrastructure that's in Overwatch League is something we haven't seen before in any other league, right? It took League of Legends and LCS to almost like 4 or 5 years to get to where Overwatch League is in 2. And I think a lot of what we're seeing is that, a lot of players from a lot of different countries are playing in the Overwatch League. Like, I think this is the biggest push I've seen for any individual esport league to almost make it look like an NFL league or an NBA league. What I'm worried about is if they keep broadcasting and keep playing games throughout the NFL season, which is arguably one of the biggest sports in America, and if they start, broadcasting during major soccer leagues like MLS and the Spanish Soccer League and the European Soccer League, I want to see if viewership will go up or down, right? I think that's what's really important here.
Right. And so Overwatch League, their calendar doesn't really compete too much with the NFL, but they do compete heavily with the NBA and the end of, European soccer season as they did last year. I think the big thing that I'm excited about is that the product is really improving. The camera angles are so much better this year. It's just easier to follow the games. Last year, they did a lot of first-person camera work, and POV stuff is just really hard to follow, especially with Dive, because characters like Genji and Tracer and even Winston and Diva are moving around so fast, and the third person POV to me is just a whole lot better. The 2018 finals drew 10.8 million viewers. 13 million tuned in to see the opening week of Season 2. I think Overwatch League can compete with these big shows in traditional sports.
I think what we're seeing right now is that what's more surprising is that right now the meta is GOATs, right? And that's generally considered like a very boring meta, right? And I think a lot of people don't like seeing it. What I'm interested in is how the meta shifts as well will affect the game viewership. And I think as the game becomes less GOATs with all these patch changes and everything, I think we might see more viewers. I'm just worried that it was an opening weekend kind of thing, and with the hype might die down. Like give it 2 more months, and how many NBA games are people paying attention to? I think there's a lot of disconnect right now. I think these numbers aren't necessarily disingenuous, but I think they're inflated for sure.
Right. I don't mind watching GOATs. I think it's a lot easier for the untrained eye to follow. It is slower. It's, you don't have the breakneck pace that you get with Dive, but I find, the way people the way teams are rotating and changing positions and so forth is really fascinating. And the fact that team fights, often take a little bit longer is totally okay with me. And I think it just may be more approachable for someone who's, never played Overwatch or has only played, 5 or 10 hours of the game as opposed to hundreds of hours. Our guest today is the director of esports for the Coker College Cobras. We are really excited to have Joe Rudy with us. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you here. So you're at Coker College now, but tell us a little bit about how you got here. Tell us your story prior to Coker.
So it actually probably started back in my first year of college. I went to Penn State University. I was just a normal freshman looking for clubs to join, stuff like that. And I actually found out about the game League of Legends probably my first year of college, which is not a great time to find out about that game, in all honesty, when you're trying to study. And then there's this big game that takes over your life. But so I started playing that, and I had some people I talked to in one of my classes that were also big in the game, and they were creating a League of Legends club. So obviously I joined in right away. The club grew and grew into being more than just League of Legends. It went into other esports, and that's how I found out about games such as StarCraft, which I never really understood too much of how to play it, but watching it, I was always very excited. And this was like my first introduction into esports. So I, growing up, loved sports and I loved playing video games. And to me, this was like the perfect combination of the two. And I just never looked back after finding that club. As things went on, I started doing a lot of tournament organizing for the club. I also was a caster for the club for the longest time. I got really well known in the club and eventually became the president of the Penn State Esports Club. And then I just used my position there to make as many events as I can, make myself well known, and had a lot of fun with it. One of our biggest events we had is we did an intercollegiate LAN where we brought in a bunch of other schools such as Ohio State, Pittsburgh, to come to Penn State and compete in an 8-team tournament. We worked with the College of Communications.
Do we know how many players?
I believe it was going to be, so it'd be 40 players playing, but I believe some teams brought subs with them, so it'd probably be around the 45 to 50 player mark.
Nice.
That came to Penn State to compete. And we also worked with the College of Communications where we had some comm students come in. They wanted to try to get into the scene of esports. They would do like interviews between the matches. They would do interviews with people who were casting as well. So it was a nice little collaboration that we had with the school to throw this event. And yeah, after that, I noticed that Coker was looking for a head coach and director, and I answered the call, and here I am.
So now you're here. What teams do you have? And how do you balance coaching for multiple esports?
Yeah, so right now we have 3 main teams. We do have Hearthstone, League of Legends, and Overwatch. And it is kind of hard to do that balance. Luckily enough, we have a lot of captains who do help me out quite a bit in each of the games. Coming in, I knew a lot about League of Legends. I knew a lot about Hearthstone. I know Overwatch, I know the game, but when it comes to coaching it, I definitely didn't know it well enough. So I got to shout out to my captain for the Overwatch team who has done the majority of the coaching in that. So that helped me out greatly. I do mostly just a directing role for that. But balancing between Hearthstone and League of Legends, it is fairly easy. League of Legends was a game that I've been playing since 2011. So it's a game that I know extremely well. Hearthstone's a game I played ever since it was in beta. So it's another game that I know extremely well. So balancing between those two is fine. Overwatch doesn't need a lot of coaching per se. It's a lot of going over some of their ladder matches, some of their scrims, and kind of seeing where little tweaks can be made here and there. Where in League of Legends is a little bit different. We do a lot of personal VOD review where we'll go over with a single person. We'll do a lot of team VOD review where we go as a whole team. And it just makes sure that we have separate days for that, so we're not trying to all cram it in all at once.
Right. How much do you spend? How much time do you spend coaching versus doing administrative stuff for the university? I mean, I'm sure that things like making sure your players are remaining eligible and things like, compliance. I don't know how all of that compares to, how, like, I'm pretty familiar with how NCAA sports work, both from a playing perspective and a coaching perspective, but esports, I don't know what the governing bodies look like. I don't know how much university oversight there is. How does that all play into the equation?
Yeah, so I would say it's almost 50-50. I might do a little bit more coaching than administration at this point, especially now that we're in season. But yeah, it's roughly 50-50. There is a somewhat of a governing body called NACE. They don't really have too much say into it, but it kind of at least gave us the structure that we needed to get started. And all the other schools that are involved in it, which are over 100 schools at this point, do have some sort of structure. And that's going to be the basic things of minimum GPA, minimum credit hours, stuff like that. But yeah, like you said, I had to do a lot of making sure that my players are staying eligible, making sure that they're going to classes, making sure that their grades are up, making sure that if there's anything we need to do, such as I know our teams had to get physicals at the beginning of the year, which you don't really see too often in esports programs, but we wanted to mimic our program with the rest of our athletics as much as possible. Luckily, we get to pick what we want to take from there. So all the regulations that the NCAA has, we kind of just ignore. But everything else of making sure that the team is academically eligible, we kind of just took right from the rest of our athletic program.
So are you guys are under the athletic program, and like the athletic director or the vice president of athletics, whatever that title is, that person is the person that you directly report to?
Yes. So it's actually right to our athletic director. So we do have a building here at the Deloach Center at Coker, which is basically where all of our in-game sports are played, but we also have where all the other coaches are located at. So I am in the same building as the rest of all the other coaches, so I get to really talk with them and see how they're running their programs and making sure that ours is very similar.
How many players do you have on a team? So for anyone who doesn't know, Overwatch is usually played 6-on-6, League of Legends is 5-on-5, Hearthstone is 1-on-1, but obviously you'll have more players than that on a team. How big are the rosters?
So at the start of the season, we had total probably only like 6 for League of Legends, 7 for Overwatch, which I was hoping to get a little bit more, but being a first-year program, I'm still pretty happy with those numbers. Every person on our program is recruited in. We don't have many walk-ons. We do have, I think, 1 for League of Legends, and that's it. Everybody else on our teams has been recruited in. So that's one thing that's really good for our program, that we were able to bring in some really top-tier players. So coming in for the next year, we are hoping to double our numbers. So we do have an A and a B team, plus a little bit of extras as well for subs. So it's one thing that I'd highly recommend. Don't go with just the base minimum that you would need. Try to go for that little bit of extra players, because it happens where a player might have work and can't make a game, or they have classes and can't make a specific scrim. So instead of rescheduling the entire scrim, you could just use a sub. So highly recommend getting at least 1 or 2 subs per your games.
Right. So just to be clear to our audience, this means when you say players who are recruited, that means they're being offered a scholarship. What does that process look like? What sorts of scholarships are out there? How does that all work? I'm familiar with it from a traditional sports side, but some of our listeners may not know anything about that process at all. What does the selection and recruiting process look like?
Yeah, so here at Coker, I mimicked a lot from the traditional sports side, where it's based on both your need and also how well of a player you are. A lot of other schools kind of have just a base set of, hey, if you are platinum in League of Legends, we'll give you the X amount. If you're diamond, you'll get a bigger amount, where I kind of do it from a case-by-case basis. So the way that process goes is that they apply to the school, they put in their FAFSA, they put in all that stuff so that they could see of their, not only their academic, but how much money they get from the government for financial aid. And then after that, they set the admissions team sends me a financial package, kind of listing out like, okay, this is what they got for an academic scholarship. This is what they got through their financial aid packet. So I could kind of see of what kind of need the player has. And then I talk with them, check out their profiles, be it on Overbuff or op.gg. Now that we have a team around, I could have them playing a few games with the team that's already on board. And then from that information I get, I can determine what scholarship that we're going to give that player.
That makes sense. So let's back up a little bit. Starting the esports program, tell us a little bit about that process. Like that, you said they were looking to hire you as the esports director and head coach. How much of the infrastructure was already in place when you got there?
So a lot of the ideas of what they wanted was already in place. So that's one thing that was definitely a breath of fresh air, was that I didn't have to come in here and really haggle. They really already knew, hey, this is a program that we wanted to bring in. We know it's going to cost X amount of dollars. They had a lot of their information already set up before I came in here. But besides saying like, hey, this is where we want the gaming space located, this is where how much money we have allocated for it, there wasn't really much too else that they had. Everything else was kind of up to me to kind of decide of what I thought was best for the program. So I kind of had free reign over this past year of how I wanted to run the program. So they knew what they wanted, but they realized that it wasn't their area of expertise. So they knew to kind of just take a step back and be like, all right, we'll allow him. He's the person who knows the college scene. We'll let him run the program. So I've been very thankful that they kind of just let me go out and do almost what I wanted.
If someone was trying to start a program at another university where there was a little bit less infrastructure in place, what things would you advise that person to look for in terms of making sure that they had what they needed to run a successful program? Like, what things have been the greatest assets to you? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense, yeah. So the first thing I would definitely recommend is checking with faculty on campus that would already help support it. That's going to definitely help drive your point a lot faster is if there's more voices. If it's just your one voice going against the board, it's not really going to go too far. But at the same time, look for students as well. Is there already a gaming scene on campus? Is it esports? Is it more of just the casual gaming space? If you could get that hardcore esports scene already on campus, it's going to help springboard into the program. At Coker, sadly, we actually didn't have much of a scene before. We had a few players, like a few gold League of Legends players, and that was really it. So we had a lot of people who were interested, but we didn't have those really good students where it's like, oh, we could build a team around this guy. That's why the majority of our players are recruited in. So I would recommend seeing what you already have on campus. That is the best place to start. Do you have faculty that's interested? Do you have players that you can build from? That's going to make it 10 times easier, especially if you could find a team that's already playing. Right.
So you were talking about like the quality of the players that are already available. So one thing that I'm really fascinated by in terms of dealing with really good players, how does the collegiate esports scene interact with the pro scene? Like, what's the skill differential? Do almost all of the best players go pro, or do they make that choice based on upbringing and lifestyle preference? Like, do you have situations where you are interested in a player and then they decide to go pro instead of looking for a college scholarship?
Where I'm at, it doesn't happen too often. Most of the times people go to the Collegiate League because they're a good player, they're not good enough to go pro, and they might as well save some money if they're going to go to college. The amount that do go pro, it does happen. It is fairly rare. I believe Harrisburg might have lost a player recently due to the training grounds that Riot just recently had. So it does happen. It is fairly rare, though. I would say that the Collegiate League and the pro scene are vastly different skill difference. If you got in League of Legends, let's say the 5 best players in Collegiate, they would probably still lose to the worst team in the NALCS. Quite possibly even lose to one of the worst teams in Challenger Series. It'd be kind of tough to tell because the majority of the students that if they could go pro, they will drop school to do it. It's not going to be a tough decision for them. Collegiate is kind of for those people who are either just short of being pro or know that they're not going to be able to make it pro. So they're just going to go ahead and get that college education while saving a bit of money. So I think the skill difference is quite huge, but you will have a few players here and there that can bridge that gap. And as far as interacting with some pro teams, there are some teams that do interact with college students. Like probably the best example right now that I know of is the Philadelphia Fusion. They've been doing events with both Penn State University and Harrisburg University. They just recently had not only a show match, but also a viewing party that happened at Harrisburg, I think this past week, or it was either this past weekend or the weekend before. So there are some interactions that we do have. But as far as skill, I would assume that it's vastly different.
So what about in terms of practice time? Like, how much do you think the average college player puts in per day, just in terms of play hours or scrims or VOD reviews, just overall time devoted to esports versus the average pro player?
We're definitely miles behind because they're college students. They need time for socialization, but as well as their studies. So we can't do too much where the average pro, it probably puts around like 10 hours of scrims and VODs times. We were only able to do maybe like 3 or 4 at most per day. And that's not even every day. So it's definitely a lot lower than what you would see as a pro. But a lot of the time that these players are spent practicing is usually individual practice, be it solo queue, be it maybe playing with a few players on the team and flexing it on either League or Overwatch. or I know some of my players play Hearthstone way too often, but it's a good thing for my sake. So it works out for me. So it's like these players do a lot of individual practice, but we, like me as an athletic director, I kind of have to give them the time to focus on their studies as well.
How much do you feel like players climb over the course of a year? Because obviously, if they have a structured environment where they're being encouraged to improve, even if they're not putting in a pro level commitment to the game, how much for Overwatch, for example, like how much does your average player climb in a year just from being part of a structured college team? What sort of improvement did your players show last year?
There's definitely a big initial improvement that you see almost right off the bat. We had a League of Legends player who went from low plat to mid diamond in only a few months. And this is mostly coming from playing on better computers, playing with better people, being able to bounce around ideas with not only a coach, but also their players. So there's a lot of ways that people could improve, and you see it almost immediately. It does stagnate after a while and starts to plateau, which you usually do see. And then they start to climb slowly after that. One of our biggest success stories is we brought in a player for Overwatch who was really meant to just be a sub, because we were going to get a player for the spring. And they were meant to kind of just bridge the gap for that one semester before he was going to get here. And he came in as, I believe, low gold. So like 2000 SR in Overwatch. And he's sitting at around like Masters, I think just short of Grandmasters right now. So
very impressive.
He has vastly climbed just from having people who are able to help him show the ropes, playing with these high tier players, and they kind of brought him up to their skill level. So you will see people grow quickly.
That's really impressive. Can you say what position this player plays? I'm curious, like, is main tank or can you not say?
He's an off tank player.
I see. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the competitive system. What are intercollegiate relationships like within college sports? Is there esports, that is? Is there any sort of built-in competitive system? Is TESPA a big part of the program? That's a name a lot of people are familiar with. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so there is a lot of intercollegiate conversations. I know a lot of the other program directors that have recently started up this year. So there is a lot of people that you get to know personally from just events you go to, conventions, or just by playing them and talking on Discord. So you do get to get a lot of these personal one-on-one relationships that you get with other schools. But like you said, TESPA is a big part of it. For those who don't know, TESPA is an intercollegiate program created by, it was created by a couple of college students from Texas. That's where the T in TESPA originally was. I think it was the Texas Esports Association.
Texas, baby.
Now TESPA is just kind of a name. It's no longer anything that stands for anything. It's just the name that they stuck with. And Blizzard took them in, and now they help run not only tournaments for Blizzard, so it's going to be tournaments in stuff such as Overwatch, Hearthstone. There's even some WoW tournaments that come in from time to time. But they also do a lot of help with student run clubs to help run their program. So that does help a lot for the student organization side of it. But for us at a varsity program, when we work with TESPA, there's actually separate varsity divisions where we just play against other varsity schools. And that does give us a little bit of leeway of running the schedule the way we would want. We could reschedule most of our matches. Riot has their own program that they're doing as well, where they do have their own tournament where we're able to just be a part of it. They run it themselves. So you do see a lot of the times the game developers themselves are running their big tournaments. So that's where TESPA and Riot Games really has outshined a lot. And yeah, TESPA has helped out a lot. They are definitely one of the biggest programs, if not the biggest programs in collegiate esports at this point. And it definitely helps when you have Blizzard backing you up.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a ton of gaming culture is built around, jokes and memes and so forth. I'm sure you have some funny stories from doing a job like this. Do you have any that you can share with us?
Oh man, most of my stories I sadly can't share. It's just because when you talk with these players, you get to know them personally. You get to they have their own personalities, and it's just the way they interact, man. It's like my players, they are loud players. I gotta say that. I definitely heard some very interesting things as they've been playing, like not in like toxic ways, but just like joking around, comedic ways. But yeah, it's definitely a different atmosphere. It's something else.
What is the part of this job then that was a lot harder than you expected it to be?
I think definitely the interactions you get with the players, like it's something where as you will quickly grow bonds with them because it's gaming. You guys share that same interest. Like I've been a gamer my entire life. These players have been gamers their entire lives as well. So it's just you get to know them very personally. You get to get friendships with them very quickly, and it does make it difficult when you start to have to go into coaching mode because you have to tell them, no, you're wrong. This is how something has to work. You have to crack the whip with them, and as you grow those friendships, it does kind of hurt you in a way when it comes to coaching because the closer you get to somebody, a lot harder it is to tell them that they're really bad at something. So it's one thing where it's kind of a great thing of how you're getting these friendships because then I think coaches should basically be friends with your players, but at the same time, you have to realize that it's a job to do. You have to be able to tell them that what they're doing is wrong. They have to fix it. And sometimes there's a lot of disagreements. A lot of these players who have been playing a certain way for 3-4 years are going to be very hesitant to change and going to try to do everything they can to stick to their old ways. And it's a lot of trying to break them of bad habits.
Interesting. Any other things you've learned that would surprise our listeners? Something that you might have expected to be true that turned out not to be true, or something that you thought wasn't going to be the case that did turn out to be the case? What else has surprised you about the job?
As one thing to keep in mind is that the other teams you're going to be facing against are not going to be always professional. A lot of the teams we face are just from student orgs, and you get some very interesting interactions when that happens. Because like when you're messaging with people, if you know that they're a varsity program, it's going to be very formal. It's going to be a lot more professional than when you see other teams who are just in chat lobby, just joking around so often, or you try to get in contact with them and they just ghost you for days. It's definitely something you have to keep in mind that a lot of the teams that you're facing are just college students. They're not somebody who has a full-time job in doing this. So it's a lot of patience in that regard when dealing with other teams, but it's something where I got used to because I helped run my team's test split tournaments at Penn State. So I knew how a lot of the teams would react when we talked to them, but a lot of the other program directors, it threw them through quite a loop when they first tried to reschedule games or try to talk with other programs when they realized quickly, it's like, oh, this is just some college junior who is just doing it for his team.
So I'm sure you guys have had some tough moments and some great moments, but in terms of things that have tugged at your heartstrings, things that have really warmed your soul as a person, what was the most heartwarming moment for you as Coker's director of esports and head coach?
I think right now, one of the most heartwarming things for me is seeing how involved the parents are with their players. We stream almost all of our matches on Twitch, and we see a lot of family members who come in and would be like, hey, I know nothing that's going on, but I'm loving it. And it's from we have a player named Veli, and we have someone in Twitch called Mama Veli Celis, and then we have someone whose name is Salty Wolf, and then there's someone in Twitch chat called Mama Salty. So it's you see a lot of these things where it's they just create their own Twitch name to follow their son or daughter playing through these tournaments, and they name themselves after their son and daughter as well. So it's just really cool to see Twitch pop up with all these family members that are naming themselves after their child. And a lot of them would say hey, I have no clue what's going on, but I'm loving it. It's high action. It's something like that. Or one time we brought in casters who, when they casted the game, we told them to dumb it down a bit and kind of just make this as more of a teaching moment. And they really loved that because they got to understand the game in a lot better sense. So there was a lot of things that worked out well seeing these family members being involved. I think that one of the best moments for me personally, though, was as I was working with an event on campus. I wanted one of my players to come by to kind of show off the program a little bit. And when I asked her for it, she basically responded with something like, oh yeah, you changed my life forever. I'll do anything. It's something where it's hearing that really makes the job a lot easier.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think this is what we really need in order to help people identify with esports on a cultural level, to help them understand that, we're gamers are humans just like anybody else. We have wants and needs and desires, and there are things that make us afraid and there are things that make us brave, and we just want to self-actualize, I guess, kind of like anybody else does. So What advice would you give to someone who wants to do a job like yours, someone who wants to get into coaching or administrating collegiate esports?
So one thing I would recommend, which actually this is something we could have probably put earlier as well in the what surprised you about this, but it's this one thing to remember is that you're gonna have to be patient when you bring these players in, because the skill level between the top collegiate team and one of the lower ones is vastly different. There is no D2, D3 in collegiate esports. It's just everybody in one giant pool. So when that happens, you're going to have these giants such as like Harrisburg, Columbia, Maryville, who have these huge programs that they are able to give full rights to these students. And then you're going to have whatever students you were able to bring up, be it whoever's on campus, be it whoever you were able to recruit. And that is going to be a giant task to take on because they have such experience. They've been around for years. And like I said, they're able to bring in the best players. It's something where you're going to come in, you're going to have quite a bit of success, but it's going to be still an uphill battle. And that's one advice that I would put into it, is that this is something that you won't come in the first year and you will be hitting home runs right away. You will have decent seasons, definitely. You'll beat a lot of the teams that are down in the lower standings. It's like the difference between a 4-2 team and a 6-0 team in Overwatch, for example, is vastly different. It'd probably be between the best pro team and one of the lowest challenger teams in League of Legends, for example. So it's going to be a very big difference between teams once you start playing the collegiate scene.
So, and then in terms of players, like if someone is a high school player, and let's just say we can't change anything about their skill level. Let's say, so a player is, they're a maybe a diamond or maybe low masters Overwatch player, because that's the frame of reference that I'm most familiar with. What can they do to get, to increase their chances of getting offered by a program like yours, or maybe have offers from multiple programs to consider, assuming that we can't change anything about their skill? What's the most important step that they could take to get their name out there?
The best thing I'd recommend is try to find some sort of team to play on right now, get as much experience as you can. I am blanking on the amateur program in Overwatch right now. It's not Challengers. What is it called?
Contenders, that is it. Try to get into Contender, or there might be something under Contenders as well, where you could try to compete to get into Contenders. But find an amateur team to play with. Try to get some sort of competitive experience, because that is something that schools are going to look into. If you're trying to go up with another diamond player and it's just, here's two diamond supports, they're both hovering around the same SR, they both play the same heroes, relatively the same stats, you're not going to stand out too much. But if you have the same exact resume as somebody else, but you add on to there, I played for these competitive teams, here was our records, we played in Contenders or was trying to get into Contenders, stuff like that, it's going to help a lot out, because it shows that, hey, okay, this guy has some competitive experience, he knows how to work with a team, he knows how to what scrims are like and stuff like that. So experience is one of the biggest things you could have in esports, and if you could show that to a college director of esports, then it's going to help you out and help you stand out. Makes sense. All right. So then last question, how can our listeners follow what you're doing? How can they pay attention to the Coker Cobras? Where would they look for your stuff?
Yeah, so you could find us. Most of our social medias is just Coker Esports. So for example, we have a twitter.com/Coker Esports. And then our Twitch is also Coker Esports as well. So we try to tweet out whenever we're going live or any sort of big events we have. Like, for example, we had a tweet not too long ago of one of our players recently hit Legend very early on in the season for Hearthstone. So we do stuff like that. A player of ours was in the top 500 for Overwatch, so we will definitely do a tweet about that. And then, we try to stream as often as we can on our Twitch. Whenever we have matches, we stream. We do a little side events as well. We did an extra live stream this past year. But also coming up, we have one of our players who is trying to play in a tournament for Hearthstone, and we'll be trying to stream his point of view from our side as well. So we're going to be doing a lot of things more on our Twitch than just our games. But those are the two biggest social medias that you'll be able to find us at.
Good stuff, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Joe. We really appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to check back every week for more episodes. We will have another weekly news source coming very soon, which is titled In Case You Missed It. If you have a moment to subscribe to the pod on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review or offer us some feedback, we greatly appreciate it. We love positivity, but also we want to make the show the best it can be. If you want to do more to support us, consider joining our Patreon under Top Score Solutions and get access to exclusive content and perks. We've also put links to our Discord, Twitter, Facebook, and website in a shortened link in the show post. We've also got our first episode up on YouTube for those who like to use that platform. We appreciate you listening. Stay gold, everyone.